Gustavo Lemos is taking a page out of the Ryan Garcia playbook. But instead of coming in 3 pounds overweight, he decided to double that and come in 6 pounds overweight. That's right. Lemos is coming in 6 pounds overweight. Keyshawn Davis weighed 134 pounds. Lemos weighed 141 pounds. And so Keyshawn Davis decided, well, I'm going to take the bread.
Y'all see that 6 pound shit going on? 6 pounds? That's crazy. 6 pounds is crazy now. I almost called the fight off. I was about to say, oh, no, hell no fight. I was going to do it on stage. 6 pounds over? Bro, he was 141 point something. You might as well fight 147. I'm fighting a 147 pounder. I'm fighting a 47 pounder. 6 pounds is wild. So when I go in there and put hands on dude, what y'all gonna say then? Oh, he's still not ready. Oh, I can't take power. Like, what are y'all gonna say? What are y'all gonna say?
In the event that Keyshawn Davis does go in there and beat Lemos, I'll tell you what I'll say. I'll say it's impressive, especially because Lemos was in a very close fight with Richardson Hitchens, and I don't remember how I scored it, but I know that the fight was close enough for me to think that the result may have been in doubt at the time the decision was read, and I know that he was making a lot of excuses after the fight. But Keyshawn Davis probably thought about what happened with Devin Haney, because shortly after it was announced that Keyshawn Davis was going to continue with the fight, it was reported that there is a rehydration clause and that it's a strict 148. So that means that Lemos will not be able to rehydrate over 148 pounds for the fight. So basically, Lemos has a good 7 pounds that he can rehydrate. But people clowning Keyshawn Davis for the rehydration clause, they're not understanding something. It's the same situation that happened with Devin. Devin had to drain himself, strip his body of nutrients to make weight. And he made the weight and then he rehydrated. But Lemos is still going to have the benefit of not draining his body, depleting his body to the point where he had to make 135. And we're not talking about 3 pounds. We're talking about 6 pounds. It's almost like he didn't even attempt to make weight. And if he did attempt to make weight, like Keyshawn Davis is saying, Lemos is fighting in the wrong division. So you got to give it to Davis. He's still going through with the fight. Putting the cap on the rehydration is something that Devin probably should have done. So you know what they say, smart people learn from the mistakes of others. So I'm not going to clown Davis for this. I'm not going to make a big deal about Davis putting the rehydration clause in this fight. He could have called it off. So to me, it's not a sucker move. It's a smart move. At the end of the day, boxing is a business. With that being said, you can tell by the weigh-in, Keyshawn Davis does have a serious height advantage, reach advantage, and you know, it's one thing to put on a show. It's one thing to try to go for the knockout. But recently, we've been seeing fighters getting knocked out or put on bad performances on the biggest stage, trying to look spectacular. Ben Whitaker comes to mind. So Keyshawn Davis should do what he does best. He should try to win with boxing, break him down with body shots. And once he feels like the sting from Gustavo Lemos' punches are starting to fade away in the later rounds, he can press the action and try to get the knockout. But for all you slick boxers with talent, don't let the media trick you into thinking that boxing skills are a curse. It's only a curse when you don't make a fighter pay for missing. The great Floyd Mayweather used to have a vicious right hand lead, right hand straight right counter every time an opponent would miss. He would use other punches to counter as well. Floyd would read and react. But he definitely had the straight right counter on lockdown. And this is where fighters miss. This is where fighters lose. And this is where boxers become boring. You have to discipline the bull. And if Davis is able to discipline Lemos in their fight, he should win. I'm picking Keyshawn Davis, but let me tell you this. It would not shock me if Lemos won, especially not having to make weight and coming in 6 pounds overweight. Look at Lemos' fight with Richardson Hitchens, and you'll see Lemos is the real deal. A fight that has gone under the radar, Subriel Matias is fighting this weekend, this Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on payperview.com. That's ppv.com. and he's fighting Roberto Ramirez. Now, Roberto Ramirez was knocked out by William Cepeda, the same William Cepeda that's fighting Tevin Farmer. Now, let me break something down. When Subriel Matias lost his first fight after signing with Matchroom in Puerto Rico to Liam Perot, I always stated how that decision made me wonder how much of an asset Subriel Matias really was to Eddie Hearn, and if Eddie Hearn really put Subriel Matias in the best position to succeed. Well, after leaving Top Rank to sign with Matchroom, Subriel lost his belt in his first title defense with Matchroom, fighting a dangerous opponent like Liam Perot. There have been rumors that Liam Perot is now going to defend the title he took from Puerto Rican fighter Subriel Matias in Puerto Rico against Richardson Hitchens of all people. The same Richardson Hitchens who was afraid to fight Subriel Matias went on record saying he was afraid to fight Subriel Matias and stated people have families. So Richardson Hitchens didn't want to fight Subriel, but now he's stepping up to fight Liam Perot. It almost reminds me of the same situation at lightweight. Once George Kambosos got the title, everyone who was worried and avoiding and dipping and dodging to fight for Undisputed was ready to fight George Kambosos. As soon as Vasily Lomachenko stepped down, everyone was like, hey, man, let me get the fight. Everyone was campaigning for the fight, and that fight went to Devin Haney. Now, my point is this. If Eddie Hearn really saw Subriel Matias as an asset, why is he no longer fighting under Matchroom? Why is he not fighting on the zone, on the undercard of these big fights that are happening on the zone tonight? How come Subriel Matias is now fighting on PPV.com? The best way to rebuild Subriel is to put him in a showcase fight on the undercard of one of these major fights. And Eddie Hearn does work with Turki Al-Sheikh, so Subriel Matias is the perfect fighter to bring to Riyadh season. Put Subriel Matias on a card in Riyadh season, let him do what he does, the people would love him. We always talk about how there's still value in a fighter after a loss. So Subriel Matias, a man who was one fight away from superstardom, if he was placed against the right opponent in Puerto Rico and had a devastating knockout, would have continued his knockout streak of knocking out everyone he stepped in the ring with. Why wasn't he given that opportunity? Why is he no longer on Matchroom? If he was a priority, if he wasn't set up to lose to Liam Perot. Another question. If Subriel Matias was a priority, why didn't he have a rematch clause? Anthony Joshua has a rematch clause even when he's not the champion against Daniel Dubois. Had a rematch clause. He probably had a rematch clause against Francis Ngannou, if we're being honest. Anthony Joshua had a rematch clause against Andy Ruiz, had a rematch clause against Alexander Usyk. We talk about Bivol losing. The first thing Eddie Hearn says is, I want a rematch. How come Subriel was never given the opportunity of having a rematch? These are just things to consider. At the end of the day, Subriel Matias is the fighter. He has the power to decide the fight, not Eddie Hearn. I get that. But there are little things you can do, situations you can put fighters in, pressure you can put on fighters that hurt their ability to perform. Look at the way Subriel Matias performed in Puerto Rico against Liam Perot, and look at the way Anthony Joshua performed in Saudi Arabia against Daniel Dubois. Sometimes when you put a fighter in a position where all the pressure is on them and there's absolutely no pressure on their opponent, it makes them freeze under the big lights. You really have to look into this. I'm not making this up. This is real. When your opponent can be so free because there's no expectations. I thought Anthony Joshua would steamroll Daniel Dubois. So did 85% of the people who follow the sport of boxing. And it was probably 90% of the people who thought Subriel Matias would beat Liam Perot in Puerto Rico. The pressure of fighting in front of your home fans, 90% of the people thinking you're going to win your first fight on Matchroom. You're on the cusp of superstardom, and now you got to fight a tough contender like Liam Perot. Anthony Joshua, coming off of stellar knockout performances, particularly the one against Francis Ngannou. He's stepping in the ring with a dangerous guy like Daniel Dubois, and he knows if he wins this fight, his very next fight, he's fighting for undisputed and all the riches. Now, again, you can't fault Eddie Hearn for Joshua not having the best performance. But again, like I said, it's the situations that you put the fighters in. And it's also the way you speak in the buildup. The way Eddie sells these fighters puts them under immense pressure. But we're talking about something different at this point. I just want to let everyone know that Subriel Matias is fighting this weekend as well. You can catch his fight on ppv.com, and it's going to be 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. Pacific Time. Now, Subriel needs to go out here and have an excellent performance. Like I said, this man was knocked out by William Zepeda in the 5th round. So this should be a showcase fight for Subriel Matias. And if it's not, and if he struggles in this fight, it may be a sign that his career is headed on a downtick. But if he comes out here and has a great performance, perhaps he can get signed by another promotional company, maybe even go back to Top Rank like Teofimo Lopez did, and sign with a promoter who will value him and know how to match him to the point where he can have a mega fight against one of the champions at 140.
Also, there have been rumors that my company, Golden Boy Promotions, may do a 5-on-5 against Matchroom Sports, which is run by my buddy, Eddie Hearn. Bruh. We all know Eddie has the worst record as a promoter, and his fighters aren't the cream of the crop. Bruh. But I'm always up for giving the fans a good night of fights under one condition. The fights will be contested in a tiny ring, so nobody can run. And since we have the best matchmaking in Golden Boy, these are the fights I propose. Vergil Ortiz versus Boots, Munguia versus Pacheco, Zepeda versus Shakur, Oscar Duarte versus Devin Haney, and the winner of Ramirez Barboza will take on Jack Catterall. Hell, let's even make it a 6-on-6 with me and you, Eddie, in the main event. I see you've been taking box aerobic classes. Pow. Bam. So let's give the fight fans what they really want to see. Me kicking your ass.
Eddie Hearn responded by saying, "We'll make this easy for you. Boots versus Ortiz, agreed. Munguia versus Pacheco, agreed. He left you for Top Rank, but if you can bring him back, agreed. Shakur versus Zepeda, agreed. Duarte versus Haney. Devin is not officially with us, but happy with the fight and to discuss with him. Catterall versus Barboza / Ramirez, agreed. Clean sweep." And then he at Turkey Al-Sheikh. Now, one of the things that I want to do is make it very clear that Riyadh season is actually a boxing league. And I've been saying that. And you can see Turkey Al-Sheikh taking the pictures with Dana White. Dana White has influence. They want to make boxing more like UFC. I'm not a big fan of that. I've already explained why. I think that Turkey Al-Sheikh and Riyadh boxing season should take a page from the WWE's book and from wrestling's book and not get rid of some of the most important characters in boxing. So Eddie Hearn is a character in boxing. And believe it or not, when you call out Eddie Hearn, he has fanboys, almost like politicals, almost like a campaign. Frank Warren has his crew. Bob Arum has his crew. Oscar has his crew. So the boxing has become a sport where the promoters are kind of important figures in the outcome and the storylines just as much as the fighters. So why not utilize that? And you can tell in the 5v5. The 5v5 is important because the Team Golden Boy versus Team Matchroom, right? And their lineups, and you have people who want to see Eddie's team win. You have people who want to see Oscar's team win. And then you also have really good fights. You have some people who are impartial and they just want to see good fights and they're going to be rooting for fighters on either side, right? But the point is, you got to put some structure to this. You got to add a storyline to this. You can't just have frivolous 5v5s, right? So I suggest that these 5v5s lead to bigger matchups that lead to undisputed. And then Turkey Al-Sheikh can bring out that undisputed belt that he created, that he was holding and taking pictures with when Better BF beat Bivol. So For example, this 5v5 between Eddie Hearn and Oscar De La Hoya is cool, but they should be having a 5v5 with Frank Warren and Bob Arum, and then the winners are going to face each other, or promoted in a way that all roads lead to a massive card in Riyadh season. So you have these 5v5s. These 5v5s are revealing winners. They're also going to be revealing close losers who are making a name for themselves, although they're taking a loss. Take Gerald Big Baby Miller. In Riyadh season, he hasn't had a really good win. He hasn't. But he's performed well, and he had a draw with Andy Ruiz. His stock has gone up, although he hasn't had a significant win. Daniel Dubois, prior to being AJ, he got himself in position because of his performances on undercards during Riyadh season. So these storylines are great because you get to build them. Joseph Parker's another one. People were writing Joseph Parker off, so I like that. But these 5v5s just can't be pointless and just promoter versus promoter. It should be promoter versus promoter, but there should be some storylines in it. Like, for example, I like the fact that when they're talking about the Barboza-Ramirez fight, they're talking about the winner of that fight is moving on to a title fight. So these storylines would help. So it would be better if we knew, say, for example, Duarte versus Haney, Shakur versus Cepeda, the winner of that fight, the winner of those fights are going to fight each other. Right? So that's what I'm getting at. But it's good. I like it. I like what's happening, but I think it needs a little bit more structure. But all in all, I'm cool with this. I like this. And plus they got a little bit of bad blood, and you know, they take shots at each other, and that's fine. But I think 5v5 is great. I like what Frank Warren did. Eddie's saying he's gonna have a clean sweep though. The Eddie Hearn curse is real. And I'm telling you right now, if they do make this card and Oscar De La Hoya sweeps Eddie Hearn, I've been saying it for years, and people have been disrespecting me or getting mad and getting frustrated like I said something personal about them. But Eddie Hearn is the worst matchmaker in boxing. And if he has matchmakers, they are the worst matchmakers in boxing, and they all should be fired. Jerome Boots Ennis, the man who likes to beat on Karens, is also fighting this weekend on Saturday on DAZN. And he's fighting a Karen for the second time. Actually, he's fighting the same Karen. But this is the most pointless fight that I've seen in a very long time, because in the first fight, Jerome Boots Ennis won 120-108 on all three scorecards. Every judge in their first fight gave Jerome Boots Ennis every single round. And for some reason, they decided it's a good idea for us to watch this fight again.
I'm sorry. No! Why? Why?
Now, I spoke about Eddie Hearn's matchmaking, and if you don't know, Jerome Boots Ennis fights under Eddie Hearn. And I'm going to tell you my personal belief. I think Eddie Hearn has lost all faith in his ability to make matches and to match fighters correctly. He's so afraid to throw Boots in there with anyone other than someone he's already beaten 120-108 that he decided to give the most pointless rematch in the history of boxing, because he's lost faith in his ability to pick winners. He doesn't want to risk it. He doesn't want to risk it until Jerome Boots Ennis steps in the ring with a big fight. And I'm telling you, I believe this because now Shakur's tweeting out that he's willing to fight William Cepeda coming straight off a hand injury with no tune-ups. I'm telling you, I think Eddie Hearn has lost all faith in his ability to pick showcase fights for his cash cows, and he's just at the point where he's ready to cash out. And it's crazy to me. But he wanted to get Jerome Boots Ennis a glorified sparring session. He could have picked someone else. He could have picked someone he's never fought before, and someone who he didn't beat 120-108 on everybody's scorecard who watched the fight. But that's how afraid I believe Eddie Hearn is of making a mistake, because his ability to match fighters is not up to snuff. And he's been taken advantage of by Frank Warren. He's been taken advantage of by Bob Arum. What's being missed in all this is the genius of Frank Warren. Remember, it was actually Deontay Wilder who was the WBC champion and was in line to fight Anthony Joshua for Undisputed. When Frank Warren signed Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder went to cherry pick Tyson Fury, and Frank Warren got Tyson Fury in the ring with Deontay Wilder, draw the first fight, and then the second and third fight, Tyson Fury wins. So he effectively erased Deontay Wilder from the Undisputed movement. Then he builds up Daniel Dubois in fights where he had impeccable matchmaking. Daniel Dubois steps in the ring. He knocks out Anthony Joshua, and he effectively eliminates Anthony Joshua from the equation when Anthony Joshua was in line to fight for Undisputed. You're talking about two fighters now that Frank Warren has taken and put in a position to replace the two fighters we once thought would fight for Undisputed. That's Deontay Wilder and Anthony Joshua. That's the genius of Frank Warren, but it doesn't stop there. Frank Warren brought Eddie Hearn into the partnership with Turki Al-Sheikh. They put on a 5v5. And this, people won't say it, they won't admit it, but credibility was on the line. To legitimize their stables, it was on the line. It's 5v5. They made these matchups. They selected the fighters. And Frank Warren goes 5-0. He destroys Eddie Hearn. Okay? And now Frank Warren is signed to DAZN. Frank Warren is now on the same platform that Eddie Hearn allegedly helped build, although it went over $1 billion in debt. People say you can't put that all on Eddie, fine. But if you want to give Eddie Hearn credit for all the popularity that DAZN has built, Frank Warren has now left his network to sign with DAZN, and he's effectively going to replace Eddie Hearn on DAZN. If you haven't seen The Great Takeover, if you missed it, Frank Warren is putting on a masterclass before your very eyes, and you all are missing it. Listen, Frank Warren is really brick top.